Honored guests, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Honorable Secretary of the United States Navy, Ray Mabus.
So to Chancellor King Alexandra, to Buddy Guy, distinguished guest, the fact that an Ole Miss graduate is doing the commencement at LSU, you know what this means, don't you? There is chance for peace in the Middle East. I have to say one thing, and it'll just be one thing about football. I got a great tour of Tiger Stadium today, but I want to talk about a game that happened long before most of you graduates were even born, probably before some of your parents were born. It was November of 1972. Ole Miss was ahead by 16-10, 4 seconds left to go. LSU was on the Ole Miss 10. Burt Jones was quarterback. He dropped back to pass, he rolled left, couldn't find anybody, he rolled right, couldn't find anybody, and finally threw incomplete. Still 3 seconds left on the clock. Next play, LSU scored and won 17-16. I have turned my watch back 4 seconds when I entered Louisiana. So I want you to pay very close attention, because you will never hear me say this again. Go Tigers. And I want you to know that I spelled that right, G-E-A-U-X. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you particularly to the class of 2014. Since the very first students arrived here at the Louisiana State Seminary of Learning and Military Academy in 1860, this university has been an incredibly important part of Southern and American history. It has gone from those early days to one of this nation's finest universities, some of the best faculty and best facilities in the country. And that's a testament to the skill and talent of everyone sitting here today. Faculty, staff, students, friends, supporters. As Chancellor Alexander said, my family has some pretty deep ties to LSU, and we manage to be civil to each other every day, save one in the year. Three of my 4 first cousins from Hammond, Louisiana, are graduates of LSU. Nearly all my wife's father's family, as he said, from Church Point and Opelousas, went to LSU. They are the Oyes. And I can spell that too, H-O-L-L-I-E-R. And I do know not to call any of my in-laws when either the Tigers or the Saints are playing. To the class of 2014, great congratulations. You have earned the right to be here. You've made the effort. You've put in the time. But as you've been reminded by other people, you wouldn't be here without a whole lot of help. Behind every single one of you are mothers and dads, grandparents, brothers, sisters, friends, coaches, teachers, hundreds and hundreds of other people. A lot of them you may not even know, who made your accomplishment today possible. And after the ceremony, and I know you're going to do this anyway, but after the ceremony, take time to give them an extra hug. Thank them for what they've done. Because in a very real way, today is their day too. And it's also important to remember those who in a much larger sense make days like today possible. And I'm talking about those who have worn and are wearing the uniform of our country. Those who stand watch every day to keep us safe. LSU was founded as a military school, and your graduates have a long and very distinguished history in uniform. In World War II, this campus was home to one of the Navy's V-12 programs, which was like a shortened, condensed ROTC experience to prepare volunteers to become Navy pilots to fight in that war. And like a lot of schools, Ole Miss included, until the 1960s, military courses were mandatory for the male students that went here. General Claire Chenault went to school at LSU before heading off to World War I, where he became one of the Army's pioneer aviators. And during World War II in China, he led the fighter pilots of the first American volunteer group, better known as the Flying Tigers. Closer to my own office, and I have his sword in my office, General John Lejeune also went to school here before he moved on to the Naval Academy. He was known as the greatest of all leathernecks, hero of World War I, and commanded the Army's 2nd Infantry Division during that war, which is astounding given the fact that he was a Marine. He went on to become the 13th Commandant of the Marine Corps, and he was central in preparing our Navy and Marine Corps for World War II. His letter to the Marines in 1923 is read every year to every Marine on the Marine's birthday. Now, these warriors from LSU were truly extraordinary. But truly extraordinary, too, are those who serve our country today. Every single person who wears the cloth of America. Every single person. Just as professional, just as dedicated, just as skilled as those heroes of our past. And we ought to be just as proud of every single one of them. We ought to be grateful to those who've made the choice to defend this great and unique country, because fewer than 1% of America wears a uniform today. 1% to protect the other 99% of us. 1% who have volunteered and given freely of themselves for years and years. 1% who have sacrificed day after day. Tonight, there are 6,000 Marines still in Afghanistan and almost 40,000 deployed around the world, everywhere from Central Africa to the islands of the Pacific to the shores of the Black Sea. Tonight, there are thousands of sailors on the 100 ships of our fleet which are away from home tonight, forward deployed. Deployed from the coast of Europe to the Middle East, to the South China Sea, and to Northeast Asia. And besides the Navy and Marine Corps, there are the soldiers and the airmen in places like Korea and Germany. And there are the Coast Guardsmen in the frigid waters of the Arctic. They went to Indonesia after the Christmas tsunami. They went to Louisiana and Mississippi after Katrina, to Japan after the tsunami, to Haiti after the earthquake, to New York and New Jersey after Sandy, and this past winter to the Philippines after Hainan. They are your friends. They are your brothers and your sisters, whether you know them or not. They're making a difference. They're doing something for others. They're doing something beyond themselves. They have endured hardships and family separations. They've undertaken an incredibly high pace of operations during the nearly 13 years we have been at war. Thousands have paid the ultimate price with their life. Tens of thousands more have come home missing limbs, and have scars both visible and invisible, which they will carry till their final day. Those who have served before are here today in many roles as proud grandparents and parents, family members and friends. Some of them are sitting with you as graduates and fellow students who came back on the GI Bill and the Yellow Ribbon Program. I was honored today to commission ROTC students into the 4 branches of service who form the next link in that unbroken chain. So as we approach Memorial Day, I'd like the veterans who have served or are serving today to please stand and let us thank you for what you do. Now, the question I want to ask the rest of you graduates is, will you join them? Will you serve? Now, I'm not asking and I'm not saying, and I certainly hope you don't have to, that you ought to risk your life. Although we need skilled and dedicated people defending our country, the military is far from the only way to serve. There are a whole lot of other quiet acts of heroism that go on around us every single day. It's the act of a teacher staying after school to help a student who's struggling. It's the act of a nurse staying on after a shift is done to be with a patient to comfort that person. It's the act of a neighbor mowing the grass because the neighbor has become too old to do it. Or maybe it's the act of a father putting people through college without ever telling his family. And that last example happened to a close friend of mine who found out that her father had put scores of people through college, and she found out at his funeral when people came up to her to thank her. It's the service that matters. Service to this country, service to our fellow Americans, and service to those in need all over the world. And I hope I've learned this in my own life. I graduated from Ole Miss in 1969 when the Cold War and Vietnam were at their height. I think I learned as a 21-year-old naval officer aboard a ship what it's like to be a member of a team when lives are at stake. I learned that what I did has ramifications for the next watch, the next day, and maybe the next year. So, to the graduates, do something outside yourself. Do something to make a difference. Do something to give back to this unique nation that we call home. Do something to help people who may never know you and may never realize what you did. Do something that's not just about you or your advancement. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with making money. And there's nothing wrong with seeing how far you can go in your chosen profession. There's nothing wrong and a whole lot right about looking after yourself and looking after your family. But at the end of your life, the most important thing's probably not going to be the money or the stuff that you've accumulated. The important things are going to be the people you've touched, the lives you've made better, the futures you've made brighter. I'm privileged to lead both the Navy and the Marine Corps, the greatest expeditionary fighting force the world has ever known. And one of the best things I get to do is talk to veterans of those services. Earlier this year, I was in the Marshall Islands, a group of tiny atolls in the middle of the Pacific. 70 years ago, a task force of sailors and Marines landed there during the march across the Pacific. And I stood under those rusting Japanese guns that are still mounted along that beach, and I was reminded of just how costly that battle was. While I was there, I had the honor to have dinner with a group of veterans who had been there 70 years ago and who had traveled back halfway around the world to remember what they had accomplished, remember friends that hadn't come back. Every one of those people told me how important their service was, how important it was for them to do something bigger than themselves, how important it had been to make a difference. They remembered their service like it was yesterday, and after 70 years, it had not dimmed in brilliance or significance. I also meet a lot of people who aren't veterans, but remember the 2 years they spent teaching while they were young, or the time they spent helping to get something they cared about put into action, or the trip they made and how they helped build a school or a hospital and build better futures for others. One thing is very certain as you go into a very uncertain world. There is no end of things that need doing. So I guess the question is, will you become America's next greatest generation, like the one who endured the Depression, won the war, came back to build the greatest country on earth? Will you be lauded for those accomplishments 60, 70 years afterwards? To do that, you have to do something that's going to last. It doesn't have to be the Marine Corps, but take a look at the Peace Corps. You might have had your fill of political speeches from Free Speech Alley, so you don't have to run for office. In fact, that may be the least of it. But vote, get passionately interested in the events of your time, and whether they're political or not, don't let them pass you by. Get involved in your school, your community, your state, your country, the world. That greatest generation changed the world. They changed it for the better. You have exactly the same opportunity. I hope you will do something that you don't see the results of tomorrow or the next day or maybe ever. My father, Raymond Mabus Sr., was a member of that greatest generation, and he made a living as a tree farmer in Ackerman, Mississippi. He died when he was 85 years old. In the last year of his life, he did not cut a single tree, but he planted thousands. He knew for an absolute fact that he would never get any benefit from those trees. He knew for an absolute fact he would never see any economic or other kind of return on those trees. But he planted them. He did it as an act of faith. He did it as an act of hope. He did it for me. He did it for his granddaughters that he never met. He did it for their children and generations that follow that he will never know and who will never know him. So cherish this day. Cherish your graduation because you've earned it. But when this day is over, go out and earn some more things that will be cherished long after you're gone. It's your turn. It's your life. So tomorrow, ask yourself, what trees am I going to plant? Thank y'all.